Looks good. Any games, David? Any games? Hey, Opsky. I can look at one of your games from the Classical. I know you were asking for it. What's up, Leafia? You looked at one of your games with Coast yesterday. Awesome. Awesome. All right, here's a game. You've got till the end of May. Whew. That's coming up, huh, Charlie? Let's see where you are. Mr. Charlie Silva. Highest rating, 1340 in April. And 1320 right now. Yeah. Little chunk left. Hey, Cartier. How's it going? Hope the schedule is good. Looks accurate. Looks right. Here we are on Tuesday doing the postmortem. All right. Why doesn't it show the PP? What's the PP? Oh, here. That's odd. And here you can see it. And here you can't. Huh. You guys see how I don't see anything visually. I had no idea that anything was missing. No idea at all. Wow. Smooth as can be. Smooth as can be. It's like you didn't do anything and you've got two connected passed pawns. Huh. That's a, like, feels slightly risky decision. Bishop takes? Oh, because of this. So he probably wants to do is this, this, this. That gives moderate drawing chances. So your alternative is you trade and push this pawn. How does this compare to what you did? I would sort of guess the knight goes to a5. Well, it did not work either. I mean, he overplayed his hand, but if white in this position here didn't try for this rook a6 tactic, but just made the trade and took the a pawn, this is fine by white. They've eliminated all the pawns on one side of the board. I think if you look at this position here where white's down 2 pawns, you could say that wasn't like bad for white. The alternative would be here, here, and here. If rook takes, then check, and here. Takes, and this. This is the alternative for white at this point, I think. It leaves black with this dangerous pawn, but these active pieces are trying to threaten white's f7, g6 structure. Again, it's like plausible drawing chances this way or this way, as long as you just trade here. So I want to look at an alternative for Cartier because I was surprised when he took here. I want to look at the alternative of just trading and keeping the two connected passed pawns. And let's see what white would do here. My instinct is definitely that this is better than what you did, Cartier. Is to trade rooks instead of pawns, right? From a certain perspective, like takes, you could call that trading pawns, which the side that's ahead usually doesn't want to trade pawns, and the side that's ahead usually does want to trade pieces. So like the very, very basic principles of what you do or don't want to trade off, says that you would want to do this. Additionally, if we evaluate the quality of these pawns, we would say that your connected passed pawns are more valuable than white's d pawns. So you would generally not want to make that trade on that basis either. So let's try rook b1, b5, and see if we can show this to be better for black than in the game. The move d6, I think, is an empty tactic because the rook just moves, and now we still have to move the knight, and when we move the knight, we lose another pawn for absolutely nothing. So I think that's just a straight-up blunder, d6. Trying to be fancy. I would expect the knight to go to a5 to blockade these pawns. Seems like a pretty strong square. If someone thinks something else looks a lot better, you could let us know. Then we get this situation here. Now here there's a couple different things we could do for black. We could go to the open file or the D file, or we could start centralizing our king. White might have a pseudo threat of d6 in this position now, right? Opening up the bishop, and then when you come here, the knight defends it, and the knight is anchored by the bishop. So, see, I trapped the black rook in these random grouping of white pieces. So, not that that's forced, but that might be a little worry. I know some people might think the rook's already on a pretty good square. Yeah, I agree. I'm one of those people. That square makes sense. But it looks like here, this move is annoying enough that we might want to play rook d8 to d6 here to cover the pawn and threaten this. Now, the reason to go to the C file would be it's the open file, and if we play like rook d8, white's going to play rook c1 and do something with the file. Good thing our knight's covering this fork on e7, because I was just calculating like rook here, knight takes, and then this sneaky move hitting the rook, right? And then here, oh my goodness. This is so close to being a tactic for white. This knight's almost overworked, right? Between blocking back rank mate and blocking the fork. If the rook could move through the knight, white could win with rook check, knight there, knight check. But in this order, the knight covers that, which I would call almost like lucky for black. Is there a way for white to somehow invert things and win here? I don't see it. Okay, so like if we play rook d8 here for black, maybe we can just attack this pawn and deal with it. You put the knight there for a reason on g6 to stop a knight fork 30 moves later. Yeah. I don't know why you put the knight there, but it sure worked. I guess it's just to get out of the way of the c7 pawn that you want to put on c6 or something. Like at this point here, right? Like this knight's job is defending this, but you want to advance c6, d5. You need this pawn defended, so you bring the knight over here, and then bishop g4. I suppose could also be like c6 at this point, but this first, and then c6, d5. The knight g6 is the least effective piece. Yeah, I agree. It's just the best square it had at that point in the opening. All right, are you convinced that this looks a lot better than taking on d3, or do you want to look at this some more to see why I think this is good? On rook c1, I think we safely grabbed the second pawn, and white is down 2 now and can pretty much give up. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration. There's still tricky times. We can get a perpetual on the rook like this, right? Draw. Hilarious. Look at this. Knight b7. It's a draw. Unless I'm missing something else now, but this looks like it just draws the game because the rook has to stay on this. And white just chases it. So we can't grab that pawn. Interesting question, Coder. To purposely lose a tempo just so that the rook could have moved through the knight and now threaten this. That move almost wins, you're right. Because if black plays a move with one of these pawns so the king can get out of this back rank mate, then black loses the rook. There's only one move with the rook that stops the disaster, and then white could play here, still trying to win, but by now black has time to get out. And if white now takes on e5, it's complicated, but probably not quite good enough for white, right? Black goes here, white goes here, here. Actually, who knows? Who knows if black can actually win this? Okay. But most importantly, white has a clear draw with knight b7. So we already established we can't take this pawn. How about we bring our knight back this way now? Does this work? Yeah, I'm not convinced that black can win either, Alexa. It looks like a lot of difficulty for black. But if I compare this to other options for black, it seems good. Or, I mean, if I compare it to the other option where we only have one pawn, it seems better to have it than not to have it, even if it's hard to advance. This rook c1 move's really good. I'm not pumped about knight e7 either. I see this coming here, hitting the rook. And if we go here, then just d6, right? Hitting this, and that's unleashing rook c8 and or bishop c6. So here, black's already, like, busted, I think, because this knight move just allowed d6 to come with tempo. I think I'm going to lose, like, a piece or something. So what should we do after rook c1? Can I force another rook trade? I wish I could. Yeah, I wish I could. So knight e7, knight b7, maybe we could now come here. And that looks pretty decent for black. Because this pawn's hanging and the rook trade is pretty much losing for white. We have to like assume, or let's just say the rook trade is the best scenario black can get. We have to just assume that white doesn't want it and that black would be happy with it. So here, white can't play like rook c6 and play down an exchange, so no real tactics. White has to go to one of these squares probably and sack the d pawn and get one of these pawns. So like rook here, knight here, rook here, for example. All of this makes me wonder if the rook shouldn't have gone to c8 to begin with, right? Because that rook on the c file was so annoying. Now, since we didn't stop d6, that's the move we have to look at here when we stop rook c1. So rook e7 was better. I don't know which point you mean rook e7, Cartier. Notice now it's too late for the rook to come over and deal with this pawn because white just has knight b7, rook d7, bishop c6, like we've mentioned once before. Instead of exchanging rooks, rook d2. Well, here's a totally different approach to things. How about rook here? We don't yet have a way of dealing with this pawn. But if you compare it to the other lines, white's rook isn't very good yet. So that's the nice thing black has going for them. They can try and deal with this pawn, maybe with the knight, maybe with the king coming over, or maybe with the rook getting behind if white leaves this hanging. Hey, Baguette. I'm just going to assume, David, that you know I'm not Kostya. That's a command that he must have been using yesterday. That does not apply right now. You'll have to send your games to me if you want me to look at them. I don't know that. I'll try and whisper to you, and maybe that'll make something pop up for you. We'll see. What about bishop to b7 now? Right, trying to eliminate these pawns. It's a good idea. You liked rook d8, rook c1, knight e7. Huh, you liked my line with rook d8. Okay. Let's go back to it then. Rook d8, rook c1. Now you want my knight e7 move. Now I played knight here, and I lost at first with rook d7, d6, right? But then I played this move, this move, this move, this move. And this is what you like, huh? Fair enough. This position looks very plausible for black. They're still up a pawn. Pieces are reasonable. Could probably start pushing the b pawn here because there's no rook b6. So, I mean, I would think the choice here is between like b4 and maybe rook b8. But I don't see any like pressing reason we have to hurry up this rook b8 move. And I do like the idea of just getting this pawn going. Okay, this might be the best way. Alexa, this might be the best way. Got your game, by the way, David. Improved the silly knight. The rook is good, and we've kept one passer. Yeah, that makes sense, Alexa. It's like, how much can black hope for? It's not like we're promising black a win, but this looks like a pretty decent scenario. Okay, well, let's look at rook c8 for a moment anyway. This is where we were at, right? So those pawns are going down. And I could trade, and play like this. We get everything on the same side, right? At some point, probably like bishop d3 and a rook trade. Winning chances for black in this kind of a position. I would say a bit over 50%. If it's going to go bishop d3, rook b1 at some point. I don't know for sure if that's forced. Since there's still a knight on the board, white could find some other way to untangle. Like, you know, putting the knight on a3 to defend the bishop and then moving the rook away at some point. So I guess the rook trade is not forced. Yeah. Anyway, this is playable, but similar to what you got in the game variation. So I can see why Alexa would not be like as thrilled about that. Yeah. So rook d3. I don't know, Cartier. Actually, it's not. It's closer than I thought. It's closer than I thought. On principle, this move looked totally wrong, but now the positions I'm getting are fairly similar, right? Like, if we go to this position here, here, right? This is pretty similar to the position we were just talking about, right? With the bishop and the extra knight and the rooks like pinned. Like, your chances of winning are reasonable. I kind of prefer having one more knight for black and a light squared bishop for white. I think it increases black's chances like microscopically. I think the knight can outplay the bishop on one side a little bit. But I'm not, basically I'm not sure anymore actually, Cartier. I had like a strong instinct and the calculation doesn't prove it as much as I thought it would. In the other position, you need some precise moves. I mean, here it was also kind of complicated what you did, right? Because there's like knight b6 coming. Both lines are a little bit complicated. I think white had to find some good moves in that other position too. Like white and black both had to find some good moves, and then the result seems to be sort of similar to what you had in the game. Although maybe Alexa's suggestion is a little bit better than this, right? Let's look at Alexa's position again that Alexa wanted. It's hard to find in this massive variations. The position Alexa wanted was in here. This one, right? This position here, which basically has these two pawns compared to those two pawns being traded in the other positions, and the rook not able to come here, and the black piece is pretty well placed. This here might be like the best position we've seen for black so far. This one might be like noticeably a bit better from black's perspective than some of the other ones we looked at. You know. And then again, there's enough of a massive variations here, Cartier, that we could be miscalculating something a little bit. I mean, take this. My strong instinct is to trade the rook, not the pawn, and to play b5. The calculations are pretty complicated afterwards, and it's a tough choice between like rook d8, rook c8, rook b8 maybe. So hard to know without really deep analysis. We definitely found some scary moves from white to make things a bit hard from black. Other than that phase of the game, I think the play early on here is pretty impeccable from you. I noticed if white took on a7, you were going to take c4 and win a pawn on d3, which would have been really tough for white, even with two knights against two bishops. So this was just very, very comfortable. And your opponent plays this move and you just go win a pawn. So, I mean, everything you played was pretty flawless. The only move that stood out to me as a surprise was this one. Trading the light squared bishop off, yeah, maybe not necessary, although it worked out quite well for you. Your alternative here would be to just play probably like rook e8, right, opposite their queen. And then you can play for d5 or for c6, d5 as you prefer. should be fine as well. You know, if your opponent plays h3, I think that's okay. I don't think you mind. Maybe the opponent plays bishop e3 more quickly. And I don't know exactly how you feel about that. What about your setup in general against this fianchetto opening from white? Looks solid, right? I mean, you put your bishop on the best square, your center was safe. There may be a question of whether or not you need to play the move d6 here. I mean, I know sometimes people just play like knight f6, here d5, right out of the opening, right here. Right, you strictly just played it like absolutely normal Italian game where the bishop's on g2 instead of b3. You can play like this as well. I believe this position's acceptable for both players also, right? I mean, you can see without the white bishop to like go to b5 or c4 or something, there's not going to be any refutation of your control over the center here. That said, white's position is not going to be terrible either because their bishop will be placed on a good diagonal. You have like a small central space advantage, but one that's pretty easy for white to survive, I would say. So I mean, this is just an alternative. I don't think that's better or worse than the setup you played. If you really wanted to like take advantage of white's sort of like timid g3 and d3 moves, you could try playing this move, Cartier, like a king's gambit. You know, I don't suggest this like every move like crazily to everybody. But here, this bishop not being able to come to c4 makes this like a decent position to play this, right? So for example, and I mean, I don't know how well white's placed to like take it and hold on to it. Like if you think about what's bad about the king's gambit, there may be two lines that are potentially like risking being worse for white. One is the decline where the bishop just goes here, preventing castling. And then white just brings, and then black in that case, but in this case white, just brings out the pieces and like ignores the gambit and just says, you can't castle, why did you do that to yourself? Okay, that's one line. The other line would be the Fischer defense, where someone takes the pawn and then holds on to it with h3, g4, and d3. And then one of the lines that's like pretty decent for equalizing against the king's gambit would be you take the pawn, but then instead of trying to hold on to it, you play this move in one move to sort of like trade off part of the center. That's for like somebody who just wants to like get equality and like a simpler position with full development could choose that line as black against the king's gambit. So if you look at what white's already done here, they've already played g3, so like an h3, g4 line. Like at best, they're going to try and get a position that black could have instead of that white could have. But also the knight on f3 doesn't usually commit here that early. In those lines where you hold the pawn, it often goes to e2, so the bishop can be on an open diagonal. And then the knight could go to g3 to support the f5 square. Fischer's refutation is quite likely the best, right, Alexa? And that's going to be a little bit hard to play here. And then the equalizing attempt of like the modern defense, like d5, is also, it's like at least a tempo down, and black's already got good control over that square. So I don't see anything here that's likely to refute f5. You know, I see something like this and this and this, this and this might be like the kind of variation you get here. And I would say this is pretty comfortable for black. I don't find this to be at all worrisome. So my thought is, Cartier, that you could, against this move order from white, if you want to try and push your opponent into an unhappy situation. I would say actually your best aggressive option would be f5. I think that would be perfectly fine here. I see no reason to think that would be bad. And then your other options would be, as I said, the way you played or the knight f6 quick d5 line. F5 is surprisingly pretty good here. Surprisingly pretty good. I don't see anything that would make me like white's position after f5. Funny. I'd never thought about this exact move order before. But you can see how, without having seen move orders before, how I apply sort of my general knowledge of positions to compare stuff back and forth and see what makes sense, right? Problems with this are logically the bishop coming to this diagonal or getting low on development timing, but this g3, d3, e4 is already, white spent 2 moves to bring out the bishop in one direction, so white's already given up a tempo of development. So you're not in development danger. They're not well set up to hold on to the pawn or to play bishop c4. So you're golden. You're golden. You can do this if you want. The most interesting question here was definitely this question here about taking. Yeah. All right. All right, guys. I've never seen a game before by Bradley Bloom. So I'm going to try and grab a Bradley Bloom game here. So Bradley, welcome to the Postmortem. Welcome to the dojo. Thanks for sending us a game. I hope that we'll be able to shed some light on this. You're playing white this game. Everybody's going to yell at me to put you at the bottom, even though it doesn't matter. Nice choice to go to opposite castles. This move is interesting to me. We'll come back and look at that choice. Okay, now you're in business. Bad trade. Probably. Ooh. This guy's playing all the angles. Wow. I can mod you right now, Alexa, if you actually want to be a mod. But if you want to keep gambling Dojo Gold, it's your choice. It's a nice game. Now he trades his knight for the bishop, huh? Runs to that end game. Looks equal. All right, I don't think I'm likely to find any interest in the remaining. What? You won this game? Why did you win this game? You didn't even cut his king off from the queen side. There's like no reason you should win this game. Oh my god. Okay, everybody, this was a blunder by black. Black can just move the king back and forth, and the game's a draw. Rook d8. Ugh. Now white takes distant opposition, and their king is close enough to this winning square. This is a file of operations, and let's see. Is black losing by force or not? Any move to the C file, this wins. King comes up, king comes here, and then you have to step aside and lose. This move is not immediately clear. If the king comes up, you can grab the opposition. Stepping aside, normally you would win by flanking, but here this pawn's covering that square. So this is the only move that's interesting. We can keep the long opposition. King goes this way. Now we can try and flank him here. Then he takes diagonal, and we're not on one of the three files where we can win. Here, 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 here. Bradley, you've seen a video about this? Can just go into c5. No, I mean, white can't go to c5. That's white's problem. It looks like maybe black can still draw with king e8 here. But nobody should ever be trading rooks. There's no way you should be trading rooks, folks. Oh my god. And then the guy walked straight up and... It says your username is invalid. What? Oh, yeah, it worked, okay. On LOM, no and yes. I haven't worked there full time since 2013. I do a little bit of content, a TV show or a video here or there for Chess Kid right now. But it's on the order of like 1 hour a week instead of 40 hours a week. Or, sorry, 1 hour a week instead of 100 hours a week. Okay, anyway, let's go look at the interesting part of this game instead of the part of the game for which Ronald Cyclic probably facepalmed himself. So the interesting part is, okay, we're setting up a pawn storm, how to best use this pawn storm. First of all, folks, it was a good choice by Bradley. Black made one small bad move here, right? This knight d4 concession. Now, you've got like a slightly nice position here as white, right? This bishop's blocked in. You got this free tempo when you recaptured the knight. So now you're ahead one tempo in development, in addition to being white, which is half a tempo. So white has 1.5 tempi of development, and this bishop's going to be a little passive. It's a little bit hard for black to counter in the center because this queen is giving white good control. c5 is generally going to be weakening. So it's an excellent choice here to try and create opposite side castling to press white's advantage. Okay? And also notice that Bradley doesn't choose to put the bishop on g5. A lot of people who want to be aggressive play moves like bishop g5 to try to be aggressive, right? It puts pressure here. The bishop's on the most aggressive post it could be on. Then we're castling queenside quickly, developing the rook. Yar. Right? But here's the thing. What pressure is this bishop really putting on f6? Is f6 like hard for black to defend? Is bishop e7 not a move that black wanted to play? Is that like, ugh, he forced me to play bishop e7? No, it's like the only place it was going to go. So really, all you're doing with this bishop is you're setting up to trade at some point for the bishop or knight. Neither of which you want to do. It's not aggressive to trade your piece for a less good piece of your opponent's. That's not aggressive. That's just bad. Okay? The other thing it's doing is it's blocking the move g4, g5. And you can be sure that Bradley was thinking of playing g4, g5 at some point in this game, right? Why else castle queenside? Okay? So this bishop g5 move here, not only is it not aggressive, it's flat out bad. This is a terrible, terrible move. Even though it looks so normal. People do it all the time. But hopefully for those of you who've been, and I know a lot of people have been asking about, when do you put the bishop here? When do you play h6 or not? How do you respond to h6, right? This is an example where you don't put the bishop on g5. Here's an example. Do we want to trade this piece? No. Are we creating pressure? No, because black's bishop had to go here anyway. There's zero pressure on e7, right? Plus, there's going to be tactics, right? This knight could go somewhere at some point, and then our bishop's hanging. So we're just setting up an undefended bishop, which is a bad tactical element for us, and strategically, we're setting up a potential trade that doesn't help us. So this move is bad tactically and strategically. Don't do it. f3, beautiful. The other option, I think somebody just mentioned in chat, David Menchink said, right? Bishop f4 can be a good move here as well for white. That can be considered as well. Because this move allows you to castle quickly. And if black ever plays c5, it's going to put a lot of pressure against d6, which is nice to have, just to restrain black from doing this. Yes, c5 is an anti-positional move for black, which is often going to get punished in some way, right? But there are cases where black's going to want to lash out at the white king, right? And they're going to take on a positional weakness on the d file and say, like, the position's too chaotic for that little positional whatever thing to matter. You know, they're like, ooh, positional, like I care. You're playing g4, g5, I'm playing b5, b4, c5. So it's just an option for black, and bishop f4 makes it less good of an option. So that's another good move, I think. So probably two good moves here, bishop f4 and this f3, bishop e3. Okay, so bishop e3 comes, castles, g4 is great, for sure. h6 is probably not great from black's perspective, because it allows white to use that pawn to make a trade at some point. But I think from here for the next 5 moves, this is where we really need to like dig into all the options here for Bradley and for all the rest of us. Because here's where like the skill is really going to come in as far as like how to develop the attack, right? The first step, and hopefully most people learn this first step somewhere in the 1200 to 1400 range, is just knowing that you should be pawn storming. That's the first thing you should know. It's just that you should be pawn storming, period. You don't have to do it well, you don't have to do it right, but we should be pawn storming as white here. Do you know that already? Good. That's the first step. But now we're going to get into the trickeries of, you know, do you push for G5? Do you push for F5? Do you push for H5? You know, when do you spend a tempo on rook to G1? Or when do you spend a move developing your bishop? And when do you just keep like moving the pawns and stuff like that? Okay? So we're going to see a few different opinions here probably. So Chris Mack wants H4 G5 to open the H file. Drittman wants H4 G5 all day. That is what Bradley went for as well, although it wasn't as effective as Bradley wanted. And Bradley actually ended up going H4 H5 instead of G5. But I'm sure that the intention here was to play G5. But when Black played Knight H7, then he wasn't sure about it. Probably because of the possibility of Black playing H5 in response, I would guess. Anyone have any other suggestions? Menchik did, right? So Menchik says another option would be to put the bishop on C4, queen on D2, and then he wants to go H4 G5. So Menchik wants to reorganize these two pieces to be more ideal and then go for the kingside demonstration. Right, so Random Carrot Bruh and some other people are wondering about G5, H5, right, from Black. Trying to keep it. Get the second rook involved first. You know, bishop, do we have time to play a move like bishop C4? Do we want to? Like, how good is it to have your rook able to move over and your bishop on a great diagonal? What do you think? Let's have a vote, folks. Let's have a vote, bishop C4 or not bishop C4. We're not yet going to talk about exactly how to break down between G5 and H4 and H5 and stuff. But let's just say, how many people think that there should be time to put the bishop on C4? Do a quick poll. It'll give me, a poll will give me time to think about it too. Let me see what you guys think. Let's check in on the wisdom of the masses here. Hey, Dripman, by the way, the game you just sent me, did you see the comments in the VOD on that game? Did you see the part of the game that we covered on stream on Sunday? You did not. Okay. We covered basically from the moment that you chose to play F5 until the end. So we didn't see the setup and the start of your pawn storm, but we saw the end. It might be cool to look at your game today because thematically it'll go with this Bradley game. It'll be a good pair. That'll make today the pawn storm postmortem or post pawn storm. Wow, by a vote of 13 to 11, you guys have voted for bringing out the bishop. Interesting. And it's engendering a great argument. All right, folks. This is like the holy grail of like chess learning in teams. Here's the Fen. Okay, check this out. Here's a position where you legitimately have a strong disagreement with some other players who are not necessarily better or worse than you about this, but you guys have a strong disagreement. This would be a great position to analyze and practice. If any of you have seen the 1400 to 1600 class, which hopefully Dripman has seen, the Tuesday and Thursday night sessions, in that 1400 to 1600 class, on the very first day, I had them just work on arguing with each other, right? So what you're looking for are positions like this, positions where you have a real idea disagreement with somebody, then you take turns playing against each other trying to prove your point. You argue the heck out of this position and you will get much better. So anybody out there, just finding weird holes in myself. So anybody out there who has like a training buddy, you know, you could clip that Fen that I just sent and maybe argue about it with your training buddy someday. It can be really, really good. Okay. So there are legitimate positives and negatives to this. And before you start arguing by making a bunch of moves, before you start arguing with each other by making a bunch of moves, you have to outline the reasons for your argument, right? Which a lot of people were doing in chat, which is very good, right? Some people were saying bishop c4 is going to lose time to the opponent playing b5, right? Other people were saying, you know, we don't have time for it because, you know, this stuff is really pressing, right? People in favor of bishop c4, what kind of arguments did you guys have? You guys are looking at the engine? All right, you're all banned. In the style of my friend Mark, I will ban you all from the channel if you're quoting engine lines here. Goodbye. We were about to, like, you know, investigate something and think and have fun, and now you guys are like, bishop c4 is wrong because the engine says so, and if you don't play bishop c4, it's +3. Blech. Puke. Enough for me to call it a day and go do something else. Okay, so bishop c4 to connect rooks, says somebody. Yeah, that's a good reason for it. Bishop c4 can pin the f7 pawn, which eliminates possibilities for black to escape with the king or push the pawn to make space for the pieces to defend. So that could be good. Yeah, white hasn't finished development, so maybe, you know, we should get our pieces into good position. Yeah, I think these are all good points, and then you guys can, like, argue like crazy about them. Bishop c4 is very, very appealing to me because this f7 square just got so weak. And if you look at this line, let me show you guys one line that's going to come up in the game. We'll talk about this line again in a moment, right? If you look at this position here as white, some people were saying they're happy with this as white. They're going to play f4, right? I think Dripman was one of them. It's like, fine, black close things off for a moment, but white, they still think they've got enough to roll black. If your bishop were on c4 here, you could prevent black from playing g6 by playing g6 yourself, and black could resign, right? The game would already be over. You just appreciate that for 1 second, folks, as like a possible reason why we'd have a bishop on c4. Right? You guys see how over g6 would be possible? How over g6 would be, how over things would be if white could play g6 here, right? So that's like a very, very, that's just like one good example of, like, you know, what this bishop can do here, right? This is very sensitive, and it gives us like good follow-ups with this. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. I would say the major danger with bishop c4 is if black can respond with b5. If black's going to answer bishop c4 with a move like a6 or rook b8 or rook e8, then probably bishop c4 will be pretty good, actually. Yeah, probably bishop c4 will be pretty good if black has to play one of those moves, or bishop e6, like Goalie's asking. Good question. But yeah, even bishop e6 is going to be fine for white. White will have basically connected the rooks for free tempo-wise, right, since black moved this piece a second time. And we could trade or let black trade. Either way is fine with white from here. So this move here doesn't punish white at all for playing bishop c4. And actually, I would probably just play h4 here. And the point is as follows. Black could trade or not, but notice I'm on every move, it's not going to make a difference. I want to play g5, h5, g6, just like before. The same move that I said was crushing earlier. I can do it with the bishops facing each other. there's nothing preventing me from doing this. If black goes bishop f6 or c5, my queen can always go to d3, and I didn't blunder anything. As long as I didn't blunder anything, this move here is crushing. And notice there's like pawn takes knight check here, but my point is, I don't know, maybe like some of you would be nervous about like c5 or bishop f6 hitting the queen. So just pointing out that the queen has this square, okay? So g5, h5, g6. And you'll see that this move is just winning the game. If the knight moves, we take on f7. If the bishop takes, the queen recaptures, and they still can't take on g6. Have to move the knight, and we can take on f7 when we want to and win, right? So you just play like rook g1 in a position like this. Or maybe even e5 is better here. But anyway, can you guys see why this is sort of like winning, and it was great that we developed our bishop in this kind of a scenario here, right? This looks super happy. So, against, I would say against any move from black other than b5, you'll probably end up being happy you played this move. It provides a lot of punch for one move. It's hard to come up with a move that does more than bishop c4. The problem with bishop c4 potentially, and we have to assess if it's a big problem or not, right? But the potential problem with bishop c4 is this move, b5 from black. Just saying like, I'm cramped in here, I got nothing to lose. Let's just throw everything on the board. And now what we can see here is like if we retreat with the bishop, black has c5, queen moves c4, trapping the bishop. We like randomly lose, right? If we go bishop d5, black has c6, and again, our bishop's trapped, and I think we lose. So on b5, we're forced to take this pawn. How happy do bishop c4 people feel about taking this pawn? Maybe, maybe not. Oh yeah, we could take with the knight instead of the bishop. Yeah, that might be better. Bishop c4 people are happy to take the pawn. I would say taking the pawn is like a bit messy. That would be my feeling. It's a little bit messy. I'm not fully confident. Basically, in opposite side castling positions, you're pretty much happier to lose your pawns than to capture the opponent's pawns on the side of the board where the other king is. Okay? So, I mean, it would be hard to analyze it, but b5 is going to be a little bit complicated. White will probably have the advantage. We saw a pawn sacrifice like this. Very, very similar. Almost the same. In analysis another day. Was it a game of yours, Alexa? Somebody played like g4. And the opponent took the pawn on g4 with black. But black was the one who had the bigger pawn center. d5 versus e3. Here it's e4 versus d6. And so somebody like sacked the pawn, the other person just kept control over the center and slowly like won in the center while being up a pawn. So I would guess that after b5, the position's still good for white. But white might have to win by like slow playing the center with an extra pawn instead of by checkmating the black king. And that might be the reason for those computer evaluations people were mentioning, where if you just go for your attack, maybe you can just completely win the game here. It was you who took the pawn, right, Alexa? You remember the game, I mean. And your opponent, I forget who it was, maybe Trav Kuskin or somebody, your opponent said like, hey, like, I heard that you could just throw away a pawn like this when there's opposite side castles and then attack. Like, it should always be worth it to have the file so that you can attack. Right? Why didn't I get an attack? They were like super confused. But the answer was you dominated the center nicely enough, like white here, that you were able to keep their pieces from ever getting active enough to checkmate your king. Right? They couldn't, and you can see the same situation here. Destiny Dragon, I owe you nothing. I'm the one being patient here with your annoyances. So go be disappointed by yourself. I'm sorry if you're not feeling happy about how things are going. I'm doing a very nice free service here for people. And I think you've got things backwards. Okay. So after b5, I think we would get a similar situation. Like black wants to now attack the king, and they can put a rook on this open file here. But after they've put a rook on this open file, which other black pieces are going to be able to join the attack? Right? Who else is going to hook up with this rook on b2 or on b3 or on c2? Who's coming? It's going to be pretty hard. There's nothing polite about demanding things from somebody and telling them, "Look, I have been patient." You know? You've come in and spammed me with like demands that I play games with you while I'm doing shows that are not about me playing games with people. You come in spamming all the time, demanding all this kind of stuff, and then you say you've been super polite. I don't think so, friend. And I would teach you about it, but I'd really like to focus on teaching chess right now. So that's what I'm going to do at the moment. Yeah, this is very, very similar to that situation. Okay, well, I will gladly get to your game at some point when I can, Destiny. Right now, I'm looking at this game. I'm just doing the best I can. And you should know that I get deluged with like, dozens of games per day, and I don't have time to look at all the games of all the people. There's more requests than there are of me. So, I just get to them, and other people are aware that I may not get to their games for months, and they don't bother me about it. They just, see if they can enjoy the games that I am looking at. All right, so similar to that Alexa game, here white's going to be able to hold the pawn, hold the position, and black's not going to be able to bring helpers to the rook because black won't be able to get through the center, right? This piece is passive. When this piece tries to come this way, it's just going to get traded. If black plays d5, white's going to take it and just open up white's rook in the center. So black's not going to get enough of an attack, and white's going to have a big advantage here. However, some people might find it a little bit harder to play that position for white with an extra pawn than to play just a straight up attack. All right, you are immediately forgiven, Destiny Dragon. Okay, so b5, knight b5 takes there with queen b6. All right, Drittman's got an idea for black. Bishop c4, b5, knight takes. He's going to give up the bishop pair. He's going to play rook to b8, right? And then on bishop c4, he's going to play c5. This queen's going to move, right? And I don't know what you think the best square is for the queen, but I'll just put it somewhere. And then queen b6 is coming. Okay, so black's gotten a second piece in touch with the rook, right? So we were asking the question, who's going to hook up with this rook? Okay, the queen's hooked up with the rook. She's coming for b2. Is this scary? It's actually still not scary, right? I mean, there may be some counterplay, but it would be a huge stretch to call this scary for white. b2's already defended. White can easily play b2 to b3 at some point to totally blunt the b file. Black doesn't have the d5 pawn break because this is super well controlled. If black plays knight d7 to e5 to challenge the bishop just goes to c4 and it's still basically unchallenged, right? And what you guys have to realize is white can still play h4 g5 really soon here, right? So this is like a great idea from Drittman, but you can see that black's still struggling. Like nobody would call this a good position for black, right? Still kind of hurting here, right? Let me point one other thing out, Drittman, in this line. This move here is potentially an extra problem for black, right? Just kind of like slicing up black's position with the unopposed light squared bishop. This shows like black's difficulty like to really get into the game, right? Rook here, white just has to defend this bishop with the queen, right? Queen c3 or queen a4. Hey, maybe I'll just go to a4 and get the queen in on these like weak light squares as well. And I bet like an engine would start sounding the death bells for black, right? You're already offering like the rook sack with queen b8. There's never going to be enough pieces for black, right? There's never going to be enough pieces to deal with this. Like it's gone over +3 at this point. And I don't even have to take the rook. So it's out of control. See how this knight like can't move because the bishop's like cutting everything. It's getting like brutal. So it's a real struggle to get counterplay. And we've seen this once before. Like when you're the one with like the space disadvantage, it can be really hard to whip up that attack with that pawn sack. Now, as comparison to that b5 move, I want to imagine another comparison situation for you guys. Do a little blindfold training for me for a moment and take the g4 pawn off the board for me here, okay? Black doesn't have to Coder Future. That was just an idea Dritman had to try and get something going. It was just an idea. Just one idea. But okay, let's move to another example. Imagine we just take the g4 pawn off the board, okay? Imagine maybe white's pawn was on f2, black took it with the knight or bishop, f3 came and the knight retreated back, okay? So this position, but without the g4 pawn. Do you see how that would be basically the same pawn sack structure-wise as the b pawn? Okay, so let's just take the g4 pawn off the board in our minds. And now ask yourself, would white be happy or sad if somebody just walked by the board and took the g pawn off? That's my question now. Happy or sad for white? Is white happy or sad when the g pawn gets knocked off by a gust of wind or by a friend walking by? Suddenly everybody's happy, right? We're getting like 100% on this one. Very, very few arguments coming here, right? So this is not a good position to argue with your friends about, right? And compare that with b5. b5 didn't really do much, right? But if this pawn goes, white can basically go rook g1, and look, the rook's like pre-hooked up with like the queen and the bishop. And maybe this bishop too, there's not going to be g6. Remember over here when black opened the b file and I said white could always just play b3 and the b file wouldn't be as big a deal? Remember I said white could always play b3 and this wouldn't be a big deal? Now come here and imagine this pawn comes off the board and white plays rook g1. There's no g6. So basically, this would be an example of a position where you can definitely just give a pawn as white, and the attack will always be worth it. You don't have to like think about it or calculate it, right? That's what Trav Kuskin or whoever it was who played that game against Alexa was thinking of. A scenario like this, where you've got enough activity from your pieces. This knight can come to d5 if you need it, right? Like it can get involved. You've got enough activity from the pieces, you can just lose this pawn, and you're fine. Beyond fine, you just, double rooks on the g file and win. Notice that in the version for black, we couldn't even double this rook to b8, right? Because we didn't have room for the queen. So we weren't able to bring the second rook to the b file. You guys remember that difference? So that's the two sides of this central situation. Does that make sense? Like this central position that white has allows white to accept black's pawn sacrifice, and it allows white to offer the pawn sacrifice on the king side themselves. Interesting, right? That tells you like how much this central thing is worth. And it helps explain and justify Bradley's decision to choose to castle queenside. By choosing to castle queenside, Bradley's actually emphasizing the value of his little space and activity advantage in the center, right? Because Bradley's able to launch like a violent attack, and black has a much harder time doing it here, actually. So, bishop c4, it looks like it's a perfectly good move for white as far as we can tell. So everybody who wanted to play bishop c4, good on you. Realize that black's probably going to play b5. You're going to have to take it, and you're going to have to play that kind of a position. All right? Awesome, Alf Books. I'm glad to hear the links didn't go to waste with you. Okay, now h4 should be good too. Let's talk about one other move before we talk about h4. How about this move, folks? How about just pushing g5 right away? And maybe that's what Destiny Dragon's wondering about here. Why not bc3? What do you mean, Flachspieler? Are you saying, is there a reason not to play bishop c4? Not really. Bishop d3. Oh, is there a reason not to play bishop d3 here? There's a possibility that your queen is uncomfortable after this move. This move weakens black strategically on d6 and d5. But if your queen is trapped, it'll be okay for black. They'll accept the weakness. If it were just a tempo loss, it's no big deal, Flachspieler. Because like in this position here, if black plays c5, white just drops back, and white doesn't mind. They didn't really lose a tempo because this move didn't help black so much, right? Then white's got d5 and d6 under pressure. But if bishop d3, c5, queen here, you know, a6 and b5 and bishop e6, if we don't have anywhere good to put the queen, that'll be like a real problem. Yeah. So how about g5? This is just a game that Bradley submitted. I don't think it's from a dojo tournament. I think it's just a game Bradley played that was interesting too. To them. What do you guys think of playing g5? Does white need h4 to play g5? Did you consider this one, Bradley? What's your thoughts on that? Yeah. I saw the game, Carrot Bra. So is there some reason why the H file is better than the G file? Maybe. When you were looking at it afterwards, you actually wished you'd just played G5. G5 for sure opens a file, right? Whereas H4 has grandiose plans to open the file, but after your opponent played knight H7, you didn't really follow through. I guess one of the basic questions we should know, Bradley, is you played H5 here, where the more obvious move is G5, right? Like the more, whatever, straightforward move is G5. So let me ask you this. Did you not play G5 because you were scared of black winning a pawn, or did you not play G5 because you were scared of black playing H5? Yeah, and I have to go pick up my kids from school in half an hour, David, so we'll see. Yes, but a less good environment once the school's closed and there's nobody left there. H5. Yeah, I figured, Bradley. Okay. Now, here, let's say you play bishop c4 now. What's with all the queen sack suggestions? Some kind of joke I missed? What does black do here? Like king h8? If g6, then there's this plan here, which Drittman wanted to play the whole time. f4 and like f5. Really rough. Really rough. I don't think black wants to play g6 themselves here, folks. Oh, find the worst move, yeah. So I think black would probably play king h8 here. Rook here? Or f4, f5? Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so this gives us one sense of what could happen. That's one comparison point. Let's look briefly at g5, which Bradley thought maybe they should have played. Let's have a look at this position for a little bit, see how it works. Okay, options for black right here. Yeah, the annoying thing about playing g6 in those positions at the end there, Cannibal Bishop and anyone else, is that it does give black back the f6 square to put their pieces on. It actually felt kind of amazing in these positions here to just have this pawn on g5 killing all black's pieces. Didn't it feel nice to just keep that pawn there? I know at some point we have to move something to checkmate the king, but it felt really nice to have their pieces on such bad squares. I mean, here with the knight on h7, you know, I'm really not worried about b5. Right? Like our opponent can't move. I mean, sure, we'll just take it. It's very, very easy to just win with extra material here when the opponent has no pieces to move. But let's have a quick look for comparison's sake at this g5 move. It forces a pawn trade very cleanly with no sacrifice, so that's always like a huge thing to look at for white. So we do this. What might come from black here? b5, c5, rook b8, knight h7 trying to trade stuff. Maybe knight h5? Sure. Yeah, to a certain extent, black has to hurry to try and trade something, because once white's rook on g1, you won't even be able to move this knight without getting mated. Like, I'll just show you. Like, here, your knight is now frozen, which is bad news, because like if you do something... Oh, actually, here you can stop the checkmate. I was thinking knight h7. Okay, so anyway, forget that. Anyway, one option is to move the knight to try and trade pieces. Yeah. d5, trying to counter in the center when things are going wrong somewhere else. Yeah. And d5 can be a very, very tricky move because you have this idea. Knight takes knight. And if white takes the knight, you capture this piece with check. And you're up a piece. And if you capture this piece, the knight scurries away, right? Like this. Now here, however, white still wins like this. Because white had the center. It's just... Black did everything right, but nothing goes right for black. And I don't know if you guys can tell, but black's still completely losing this endgame here. And white's got 2 extra pawns. You only need so much. So weirdly here, d5, white can maybe even just take it with the knight. Right? Finally, white can play a move like rook g1, just ignoring what black's doing. Because if black takes, then this move wins a piece. So, yeah. You know, black could try c5. Bishop takes, pawn takes. I don't think white can sack the queen just yet here. So I'm not going to play it. I calculated it for a little bit, folks. It's close to working, but let's just go here. Black did the little trick to win a piece. And this time it worked even worse than when we took the bishop on d7. Hey, Savage. Okay, so d5 is a nice try, but I think it loses, basically. I like just playing rook g1. If I can ignore d takes e4 because I win a piece, if I can ignore c5 and d4 by just coming here and winning a piece, I like this. Let's play like this. So that was d5. Yeah, the windmill didn't work, Destiny Dragon, because the bishop on e7 was dangling. I calculated it, but didn't want to burden you guys with long variations that don't work. Here, 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 here. Okay, so here's where I calculated it. Takes, check here. Now you can do something with your rook, any kind of discovered check you want. The opponent will take your bishop that's checking. All right, take care, piano guy. Hey, pizza racer. Okay, so that's that. So next we've got knight h5 as an idea, and we've got a pretty nice suggestion here from Alexa Morningstar. Getting to windmill is an absolute dream. I would always be looking for a chance to windmill. I agree completely. Okay, here there's like a nice idea from Alexa. There's also like an idea that I would consider here would be h4, so that if your opponent trades, they open another file for you. But let's start with Alexa's suggestion, which is to trade and then just boom, knight on d5. This is like a typical way to try and take advantage when your opponent plays a knight on h5. Right? Is you just boom here, and now it can't come back. It gets stuck over here. The knight's also threatening c7 and the queen. If queen g5 check, you might need to calculate here, 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 and your opponent gets a queen trade, right? So that's lame. You could keep calculating takes here, here, looking for knight f6 check. Probably, maybe f6 is the safest move for black. I don't know. White may still have chances even here. Well, white certainly has chances still. I mean, c7's hanging and white's pieces are better, but that's not good enough for us to offer a queen trade. The other thing I looked at was rook to g1 here, but the opponent can play knight e2, double check. And then after king b1, play a move like queen takes g1. Maybe there's something better, I don't know, but like this move. Oh yeah, maybe knight takes was even better. Anyway, white's going to lose. So on this queen check here, I think white has to just play king b1 rather than getting into the messy tactics. But now white's threatening knight c7 and rook to g1. So black probably has to defend this. Rook c8, there's going to be knight e7 coming because rook here, the queen wants to go to h6 and defend the king side. But then there's knight e7. So no rook c8, maybe c6, rook g1, queen here. Knight check, king here, takes. Black avoided getting absolutely murked. What do you think, Alexa? Is this what you wanted? I mean, it's good for white. It's just people want a knockout. They don't just want a good position. They want an absolute finish it off knockout. But I would say those positions I just got for white were only plus 1.3 to 1.5. you know, shy of that total knockout that we were looking for. Should we look at my crazy move? If Alexa's didn't fully get us everything we wanted. Okay. This is my approach here. It's not quite as much as Alexa wanted either. Okay. And Central NJ is saying like, hey, this is why I wanted that Bishop C4 move earlier. Okay, well, guess what my next move is going to be, Central NJ? It's going to be Bishop C4 now. This is like, okay, we've cleared all this away. Black needs to scramble to hold things together. This knight's hanging. It can't move because of rook to G1, really. Like this move here, for example, this move. Oh, sorry. Then she comes here, and I kind of want to play rook there. Okay, I'll play this. Queen E5. Yeah, we do, Destiny. At some point we do. Yeah, I'm kind of out of time, UFO. I'm just going to do this game very thoroughly rather than a bunch of games. Maybe to stop Queen E5, I need to go Rook G1, Queen H6, Bishop C4, and then I can go Rook H1, Rook G1 next from there. What could I do here? Maybe just move my queen away? Chainsaw points out a cool thing. If we can get the knight to E7, it'll be checkmate. That's good to. It's good to see. Oh, good call, Pieshka. Pieshka points out that we could have scored some style points too, not just a checkmate. Might as well score some style points while we're at it, right, folks? I mean, are you really playing chess just to checkmate your opponents? Are you playing chess in order to checkmate your opponents in an aesthetically pleasing way? Okay, so Queen E5 doesn't matter. We just back up, put our rooks on both files. This is all just a massacre. Try to run, just take, right? Now we know this from Pro Pieshka. We just take. We don't have to spend time attacking it with our queen. If king takes, it's check and mate. If the king runs this way, I don't know, we take this too. Maybe F4 first to take the queen off of defending the knight, and after she comes somewhere like this, we can take the knight. Oh, I guess I gave up this. Well, whatever. White, we know white's winning in these positions here. Can take with the bishop, maybe. Maybe try and trap the queen. I guess she can get out here. Whatever, you guys get the idea. White's up a couple pawns, and black's position's just a heap of garbage. Okay. Well, that wasn't thorough, and we're running out of time so we can't be super thorough. But what's the temperature on this h4 move? Good, bad? Can we just give a pawn like this? Does black have any hope here? It's tough. It's tough. I agree. You need a lot of variations to make up your mind on moves like this sometimes. It can take a while to feel confident. This was my instinct. Just so that, if they try and trade things, they open up 2 files for the rooks instead of 1. So, yeah. Right. So this gets at that question from before, right? Where I said, like, right here is white. If you could just take your g-pawn off the board, would you? And the answer was overall yes. So now if we look at this position here, this g5 position. Wait, how do I get to it? Sorry, g5. Sorry, knight h5. So if we get to this position, I said, if you could take the h-pawn off the board, would you? And I think, again, the answer is yes. So we go h4. Right? I think it's good for white. So Bradley, I'm actually thinking that I'm in agreement with your analysis conclusion that you should have just played g5 here right away instead of trying to make it even better with h4. I think this g5 move might be better than bishop c4 or h4 at this point. It looks really, really smashing. Although it's possible that computers would highly approve of this g5, h5, like f4 kind of position. Sorry, I just was trying to click in the analysis somewhere. Maybe something like this. Maybe computers would just say you should play like this as white. Like your opponent's pieces can't move anymore, and then you just sit on this position. I don't know. Because another thing, I mean, we keep playing bishop c4, but another thing you can do in a position like this is play bishop e2, right? And then if your opponent plays g6, you have f5, and otherwise you go take this pawn for free, and then go on about your business further. Because like Drittman, for example, says he's had positions like this. He really likes them. Actually, the only question would be, maybe there's bishop g4 slightly annoys you here, so maybe actually Drittman would tell us that sometimes you just put the bishop on e2. Even though bishop c4 was like a big candidate move for me here as well. And I don't think bishop c4 is like bad here. But maybe Drittman would just want to play bishop e2 right here to prevent bishop g4 in advance. And then he's just going to play f4. He's in no rush because the opponent's pieces can't move. White's control over d4 is like absolutely unshakable with the knight here. Black can never counter in the center. You just take it. That means if black ever plays c5, they'll collapse on the d file. And so what room do they have to do something here? They have to play like a6, b5, completely disconnected from all the rest of their pieces. It won't really be counterplay. At like a GM level, it'll just be, nothing. Like absolutely ignorable nothing. So let me see something out of curiosity. Let me see what a computer thinks of this. Jesus. The chess.com computer is not very strong, but look at that. I mean the the little like built-in thing in live chess. Obviously, they've got a really strong one, which they run with more power at other times. It's not like chess.com doesn't have access to a good computer. So +4 for this position here. So that might be saying that that's even easier to win than those other positions that we were just talking about. Bradley, what do you think? Maybe you should try playing this kind of position once or twice, Bradley. Just as like, just for comparison's sake, right? Because you probably are always trying to avoid the situation getting closed down. But this also comes up in some lines of the dragon. There's some lines in the dragon that look a lot like this. I think I had somebody show like a game like this at some point recently where they weren't really sure what to do. Against like a dragon dwarf kind of situation. And we had some positions that ended up looking like this, you know, with the king not having castled yet, but these pieces sort of being stuck in here like this. And in some cases, I think we even played f4, f5, f6, and the bishop hit on h8 or something, you know? And it's like, you didn't get to pry open the king the way you wanted to. But sometimes it's enough to just kill these pieces, right? Now when black plays b5, b4, your knight can just go to d5. Now you can play f4, f5 like freely, right? Because this knight's not going to go to d7, e5, or g4, right? So sometimes you can just like smush them with all these pawns and say like, yeah, you avoided opening up that side of the board, but we just took over everything. So that might be something to look into and like practice a little bit, playing some positions like that sometimes, I think. Sorry, chat, I've looked away for a little bit to look at the chessboard. So. Okay, when you played h5 before g5. Yeah. So, I mean, you've seen the positions on offer, Bradley. I thought that this g5 line looked pretty good, which I think is also what you were saying that you preferred. But if you look at this position here, I think I just played this timid bishop e2 and asked the computer its evaluation. It said +4. So maybe maybe you should look into playing some positions like this where, you know, they lock it up, but their pieces are so bad. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Pretty cool game. Let's see what else happens. So here, h5, I've got a bad feeling about this a little bit. Opponent plays bishop f6, dropping back's okay. Should still be pretty good. I really don't like when you trade the knight for the bishop. Let's see how that happens. Here. Okay, so this move is very committal, and I don't like it. But I guess your point was, however they recapture, you play g5 and you break things open. Okay, so my thought would be to play probably rook g1 here. What do you think of that, Bradley? As one maybe like other thought on this game. Basically, black's position is so bad, I'm almost expecting them to play c6. In which case, maybe I'll take, or maybe I'll play bishop b6. Oh god, bishop b6. Oh man, I don't know what black's going to play, actually. I actually don't know what they're going to play. I like that black can't move right now. That's what I'm slightly unwilling to spoil about this position. Yeah, g5 will be an easy attack. But like, let's say rook g, like sometimes ask yourself, like, what can your opponent play? Right? Sometimes going for a winning attack, it's not that the attack isn't winning, but it's that the attack requires like a certain like precision to carry out, right? Like it might be winning, but it might be like you have to play 3 or 4 only moves to actually convert the fact that it's winning. So right? Like here you're faced with a tough choice. Do you go bishop f4 and sack an exchange? Do you go bishop d4 and sack a pawn? Do you just develop the bishop and let them trade your bishop, right? Like you actually have like a tricky choice here or whatever, right? But what can black do to improve their position right now? And if the answer is nothing, here's a move for you, right? You felt like you'd already missed your window. You're still kind of overwhelming here, I would say. Say your position still looks fairly overwhelming. If your opponent's going to answer with a move like, rook b8 or rook c8, then you'll definitely want to have played rook g1 before you go for whatever you go for. I guarantee you, Coder, people don't get banned for having been reported. Chess.com doesn't say, oh, this guy's been reported 7 times. Once they hit 7, we have to ban them. They actually check if the person cheated or not. And that's it. So there's no harm in reporting someone for cheating, or no big harm. It costs Chess.com a little bit of time, but if they haven't cheated, you're not going to get them falsely banned. You don't have to worry about it. You can just put the accusation if you think that if you're worried, and it does far less harm than making accusations or arguing with people or saying mean things, right? Just throw a report in if you're unsure, and they'll look at it for you. Mm-hmm. I think this move is just good, Bradley. The question is, how overwhelming is your position still? But I mean, I don't think we need to analyze anything to say that rook g1 is better than knight f6. I honestly think like we don't need to analyze to say it. It's like for sure. And honestly, even a move like bishop e2 is probably good too. Like we can tell that bishop e2 just improves your position, your opponent isn't improving theirs, and you'll still have knight f6, g5 coming up. Yeah, they're proactively checking people already, Savage, and also some of that other person's opponents may have reported them even if you didn't. It's just not something that you need to worry about too much. Yeah, so bishop b5 luckily doesn't improve black's position much because you have c4. So that's important to note. Although actually, even if you just moved your queen, that would be okay for white too, right? Queen d2 looking at this target, and bishop takes, rook takes. Nothing wrong with doing this for white. I guess you don't even need to hurry knight c4. You can do whatever you want. The queen should now go to a light square. So we could go queen g2 to h3. Or we could aim for like c4. We could go queen e2 to c4. I think this position is actually like completely winning, Bradley, for your reference. I mean, the tactics are still like 2 moves away, so they might not be hitting our horizons just yet, but I think they're getting pretty close. We just have to start moving our queen towards like one of these 2 squares. And it should fall apart for black pretty soon here. So, yeah. So this is pretty good, right? Played rook g1, bishop b5. Sure, do that if you want to. And this. Yeah, very nice. I should probably move the queen here, not knight c4. But, you know, I could go like queen d3 or e2 to go over here. I could go over here to go here. The queen can't go to d7 or c8 to stop queen h3 thanks to our knight. Good job, knight. I think somebody mentioned if c5, knight d5 is good, and whoever said that was right. So, yeah. Very interesting game. Lots of little like details about how to improve our attacking technique, right? For these positions. Sometimes you want to rush, sometimes you want to take your time. That's tricky. That's tricky. Well, Bradley, yeah, I would say that this knight f6, g5 was a little bit ill-timed because here you had to make a tough decision. And after queen check here, maybe c4 here. Is there a reason you couldn't just play c4 here? I don't know. Somewhere here, I mean, it gets tricky. Oh, yeah, that move was annoying. You'd rather be able to just retreat it, but then there would be knight f2. Maybe you've got a winning move somewhere here. Maybe queen g3 to tie these pieces up. Right? Maybe queen g3 now. Threatening rook g1. Does black have a way out of that? Maybe this was a good move for you here, Bradley. But it still speaks to the point I made about the moment where you chose to go knight f6 and g5, I think put you on a path where you have to find some like hard to find moves. You know what I mean? Like, where if you play the second or third best move like a couple times, like your advantage can sort of disappear. So you're demanding like really good play out of yourself when you make that choice. But this does look winning. I don't see how the queen and knight get out of this. F6 to defend the queen. Okay, and then on rook g1, you're just going to move the knight, right? Oh, here's something maybe disturbing. Oh no. They can actually still play g6. Shoot. I wanted to just win the game here. Okay, hang on. Rook g1, knight e5. Queen b3 check. Oh, how hard is it to find this? Why did that take me 10 minutes? I think the refutation of f6 is that simple. Just rook g1 anyway. Bishop d7, bishop h3 should be the same thing. All right. Now it's pickup time. I gotta run. Run. Kostya, were you gonna take over now? We've got US chess school in like 40 minutes. Were you gonna bridge till the chess school, or do you want me to raid somebody? go ahead and raid. Okay, cool. But I can announce to people that we've got a U.S. Chess School lecture from Jesse in 40 minutes, right? So, yeah. All right. I send you guys anywhere in particular you want me to raid, Kostya? I was going to raid Hari Krishna, but if you think we need to give like the St. Louis or Charlotte Chess Club a raid, we can do that. Yeah, the class will be right back here in like 40 minutes. So, if you guys want to check out Jesse in professorial mode as opposed to like blitz fiend mode, you can tune back in 40 minutes. All right, and I will see you guys tonight if I don't feel too sick. So far, I feel perfectly good. Got the second shot today. So, but I hear it might like kick in tonight or tomorrow morning. I might feel sick for a day or two. So we'll see. But I should be on tonight, hopefully. Cheers.